Most lenses for the Z mount series cameras have been quite expensive, but there are a couple which have been on the more affordable side. One is the 28mm 2.8, which I've already reviewed on this channel. The other is this that we're going to be looking at today. It's the 40mm f2 Z mount lens. Now, this lens is very interesting. It retails at £260, so it's currently available for around 230, and it weighs only 170 grams, and it kind of fits into this very affordable, compact prime lens that I'm a huge fan of. In fact, one of my favourite lenses when I started out in film photography and then DSLRs was the 50mm f 1.8 AFD by Nikon. It cost less than £100 at the time. Fantastic lens, I've still got mine, and this kind of reminds me of that. It's the same shape, same lightness. The 40mm focal length is pretty similar too. Given Nikon didn't give us a very light and small 50mm, in fact this is the 50mm 1.8S, which costs more than double this lens, I think that this has a really interesting place in Nikon's current lens lineup. To take you through the highlights, as I've mentioned, it only weighs 170 grams. It's only got about 6 lens elements in here, though they haven't scrimped too much on the coatings. It has a really nice fast autofocus motor. The minimum focal distance of this is 30 centimeters, so you can get really great out of focus bokeh with it. And it has a 9-bladed diaphragm, which means the aperture has 9 blades, which is important because that's what gives you that nice bokeh. Now, I have some people complain about the bokeh, calling it busy. I have to be honest, it's not really something I felt. I felt the photos I've had with this lens even wide open have been absolutely fine. It's not the sharpest lens ever. Arguably, the 50mm 1.8S and 35mm 1.8S are significantly sharper, but it's not that far off either. And that's why I think this is so wonderful. At the £230 price point, yes, it's not dirt cheap, but it is cheap enough for most people that have a Z mount camera to consider. And if you don't have a prime lens yet, I'd say this or the 28mm are perfect lenses to experiment with. And actually, as a brief aside, if you have a lens like the 24 to 200mm, which I've also recently reviewed on the channel, you might want to consider using that lens for a couple of months if it's the only lens you have, then having a look in something like Lightroom, you can get a free trial for it, at your images to see which focal length you're mostly using. Because then you might say the 28 or the 40mm might suit you more, and that's how perhaps you go about choosing one. Now, Nikon has cut some corners of this lens. It has a plastic lens mount. It isn't as waterproofed or water sealed and dust sealed as its other lenses, but I have used it in the rain. I have used it in dusty environments on the beach, and it's been absolutely fine. It isn't very obtrusive either. Let me mount it on the Nikon Z6 II I have here. You can take street photos with this without people really thinking much of it. It's small enough for no one really to pay any attention. You won't look like a super serious photographer, which means people act more naturally. It could actually be the perfect street photography lens if you enjoy that style of photography for the Nikon Z series. On the Z5 in particular, I'd imagine it'd be a great combination. Given that most of Nikon's Z-mount cameras also have in-body image stabilization, you don't need to worry about the fact this doesn't have image stabilization built into the lens because it will use the cameras instead. Another thing you might want to consider is video. At 40mm, it's actually a focal length I do use quite often for video. I love my 35 and my 50mm for that, but actually 40mm is really nice for that too, so this could make a nice video lens. Again, it's not too heavy, so you could use this on a gimbal without having to worry too much about getting a super heavy-duty gimbal because it can take a lighter, because you can use a lighter one given the lighter lens and camera combination. So I really like the 40mm. I think given its price point and its capabilities, Nikon have produced an affordable prime lens that a lot of people might want to consider using. I, for one, really do enjoy it. However, I will be open with you, I'm not going to keep it. I did buy it, so I've owned it for a while now. This review's been on the list for a long time, but to me at least, it's too much overlap between my 35 and 50, which I need to keep because they're kind of the sharpest lenses I own pretty much, and I like to compare back to it. So for me, this is kind of superfluous, but I do really like the form factor and I do really like the size. So I might come back to it in the future. So yeah, there's a quick video on the 40mm f2. If you're considering one, I'd really encourage you to get one. Even if it's your first foray into prime lenses, I think for the Z mount, this is one of the best choices. It's one of the lightest lenses alongside the 28 2.8, which I've also reviewed, as I mentioned at the start of the video. So check that out if you haven't, because that might also be a lens you want to consider instead of this if you want to go out and buy your first prime lens. Hopefully you found this little video useful. If you have any questions about it, pop them in the comment section. I'll try and help you out as much as I can. Equally, if you like the video, give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, do subscribe, as it really does help me out. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you did find this useful, and I hope to see you again next time. Goodbye.